makes sense to buy a whole bird when you're cutting up a chicken. That doesn't make sense. Okay, one more time. It always makes sense to buy a whole bird when you buy a chicken because you can make multiple meals out of it. So cutting up a chicken is really easy if you've done it a number of times, but if you haven't, it's not, and it's really helpful to have a visual aid when you're butchering a chicken. So I'm going to show you guys how to do it the French way, which is the way that I learned to do it in culinary school. And we're going to cut up the chicken into 8 to 10 pieces, which is what a lot of recipes call for. And 8 versus 10 is simply whether you cut the breasts in half. So let's get started, and I will demonstrate exactly how to do it for you so you can do it at home, and always buy the whole bird. Here we have a big, beautiful chicken from Commonwealth Farm in Maine, and we are going to cut it into 8 to 10 pieces. The first cut that we're going to make is between the leg and the breast. So you want to get through that skin, make one clean cut. Make sure to always keep the skin intact, especially across the breast, because often you're going to want to crisp it up in the pan. So you want to make sure that it covers the breast. So that's the first cut right there, between the leg and the breast. And I'm going to turn the bird over like this and come in just like this. And you can see there's sort of natural lines that you can follow here. So here you have the backbone. We're just going to bring the knife up and around, trying to get as close to the backbone as possible. And then we're going to dislocate that leg and thigh, exposing the joint of the thigh bone, and cut between the thigh bone and the backbone. Again, you shouldn't have to cut through a single bone when you're doing this. Okay, so there we have our thigh and our leg. And the next thing I'm going to do is take the wing off. A lot of times I'll hang the bird by whatever piece I'm trying to remove, mostly so I can see where the bird wants to separate. Gravity is extremely useful in this process. So we're just going to cut through the skin so we can see what's happening. Again, remember the breast, you want to keep the skin intact on the breast. Don't cut into it too much. Turn this around. And this bird is very cold. You always want to work with a really, really cold piece of meat when you're butchering. If it's warm, it can get quite slippery. So we're going to cut just around here. There we go. And you expose the joint, and you cut right between the joint and the breastbone. So there we've got that. The next cut we're going to do is the breast itself. So here we have the breastbone, and you want to favor the left side because that's the side we're working on, and just make a straight cut down like this. Now keep in mind the wishbone is right here, so you want to avoid the wishbone. So straight cut down. I'm going to put my fingers in between here and pull it back a little bit. All right. Just wiggling the tip of the knife between the ribs and the flesh. So remember, the breastbone comes straight down, and then the ribs come out like this. So you're going to make a straight cut down and then come across the ribs. So that's what I'm doing with the tip of my blade. Try to keep as much meat on the breast as possible. Now, I will say, guys, this bird was frozen. And so it's really quite cold, which if you're learning how to butcher is a really useful tool because it's easier to butcher a cold bird. Obviously you don't want it to be frozen, but if it's a little colder than refrigerated temperature, that is helpful. So now we have our breast. We have a little extra skin on the top, so I'm going to remove that. And this can be used to make stock, so we'll put it in our stock bowl. So now we have a breast, we have a wing, and we have a thigh and a leg, and we're going to come back to those in just a moment. Let's finish taking the meat off the bird. So we're going to do the same thing on this side, okay? So this is just a review. Straight through the skin, like this, between the leg and the breast. Then turn it over, come all the way around to the backbone, come straight down, dislocate that bone so you can see it. There's the ball of the joint. Through like this. Okay, now we're gonna take the wing off. So again, right down, cut through the skin to sort of reveal what you're working with. Don't cut too far into the breast. And then pop that out too. There we go. Okay, put that on there. And then this is the hardest cut because it's a little bit unwieldy. So I'm going to pull the skin to the side and I'm going to favor the right side of the breastbone. Come straight down like that and then peel the meat away from the ribs. Make a few careful cuts between the breast meat and the rib cage, and then we come down like this, just like that. We've kept the wishbone intact. Again, preserve the skin. So now let's roll it over, cut any loose ends off, clean it up a little bit. That looks good. We'll put this over here. And here we have the carcass, and you can see the wishbone is still right here. Sometimes the wishbone will come off, in which case you can just sort of, with the tip of your knife, remove it. So this is gonna go into our stock bowl, along with the skin. And the next thing I'm gonna do is cut the breasts in half, just like this. Just so you're sort of portioning things ahead of time. I always like to do that so you don't have to do it when you're serving. So we'll cut this in half as well. Gorgeous chicken. And the last cut is maybe the toughest one, and it's between the thigh and the leg. And the joints are sort of held together like this, and you will kind of need to open them up to see where to cut. So the first thing that I do, there's a line of fat that runs between the two of them. That's sort of your guide for your first cut, okay? And then usually I'll stick my fingernail in there to feel where the bones separate. And you can tell just with, you can almost do it blind just by feeling your way through. Butchery is all about observation. Okay, so that was a nice, clean and easy cut, big, beautiful thigh. And then we'll do the same over here. So let's find that fat line that's running between the leg and the thigh. We'll cut like this. And then I'm gonna stick my finger in there and feel my way between the bones. And sometimes if you can't feel it, just try to, there we go, release it, there it is. Sometimes it's buried a little bit further into the leg than you think it is, okay? The proper way to hold a knife is either with your entire hand gripping the handle like this, or with your fingers on either side of the blade. A lot of people have a tendency to hold their index finger on top of the blade and point at their food. People say 80% of home cooks do that. It's the wrong impulse because this is not a stable way to hold the knife. This is a stable way to hold the knife. All right, so I'm gripping the knife with my fingers on either side of the blade, and I'm gonna practice this rocking motion so I get really comfortable with it. The next thing you want to do is take your left hand, this is assuming you're right-handed, and make sort of like a bear claw where all of your fingers are pointed away from the knife. Your middle knuckle is going to stick out the farthest, and once you're comfortable, it's going to act as the backboard against the blunt side of the knife, which creates the resistance that allows you to measure the distance between cuts. So eventually, you can see that middle finger is out there. You're going to rock the knife like this. And if that's too fast, just slow down, take your time. You can see me using the length of the knife and slowly drawing my fingers back on the vegetable. Take the skin off. Root 12 o'clock. Draw the knife sort of like a fan coming up and over the onion. Through the onion every ½ inch or so. Let the root stay intact. Spin the onion, root 9 o'clock, straight down, slide the index finger around, just like that, and then the whole thing gets picked up and put into the pot, okay? So that is that. We'll do the carrot next. You always, when you're practicing your knife skills, you always want to cut something that's on a flat surface. So that means cutting a carrot in half. You can line them both up. You saw me cut that onion into a nice dice, but the truth is if you're making a stock, this is enough, okay? So all of that onion skins and everything is gonna go in the pot. There's absolutely no need to take the celery apart. You can literally just cut the leaves. The next part of this is to throw the herbs into the pot. So really you're using whatever savory herbs you have available. So savory herbs are the heartier ones, things like rosemary, thyme, savory. Parsley is a wonderful herb for flavoring. We're also going to throw in some fresh bay, and you really want bay leaves that smell like something. If you have those sort of dull, grayish bay leaves that you get at the store, throw in more than one because they have lost most of their scent and flavor. Then you're going to throw in 12 peppercorns. Always parsley if you have it. I like to use some rosemary and some thyme always. That's sort of the traditional bouquet garni French style. So maybe rip up your herbs a little bit just to sort of release flavoring from them. Throw them in the pot, just like that. We've got our bay. I love bay, so I'm gonna use 2. And we have our peppercorns. And for me, in the springtime, the smell of chicken stock is like the potpourri of the season. I just have it going all the time. We make tons of chicken soups. And so this is like something that's so basic to my cooking instincts this time of year. All right, so the first dish that we're gonna make is a braised chicken dish. And usually when you're braising the dark meat of fowl. And there's a few techniques required to have a successful braise. The first is browning the chicken, and then you're gonna add the aromatics to the pan once the chicken has been browned and removed. And then you're gonna add some liquid to deglaze the pan, and then usually some herbs, and then the chicken goes back in along with some stock, and it goes in the oven on a low heat until it's nice and tender. So we're gonna do that today. The recipe that we're using is sort of fly by the seat of our pants. We didn't want to unnecessarily go to the grocery store again, so we're using what we have. We're using what we have in the house, which are cremini mushrooms, shallots, booze. So I have some nice sherry, butter, flour, lemon. I just checked to see if the thyme is up yet. It's not. So, and we're gonna put some mustard in there because mustard is a really powerful flavor, and since we're lacking some of the other ingredients, I feel like it'll give the dish a nice punch. All right, so the first thing I'm gonna do is strain the stock that we made yesterday. Here we have a super delicious, super rich chicken stock that has carrots and onions and celery, bouquet garni, and we're gonna put it right into this bowl here. Usually I do this over the sink, but for your benefit, I'm gonna try to do it over a cutting board. We'll see how that goes. How am I doing? Any spillage?
No, you're good.
Nice golden broth. And part of the reason it's got so much color in it is because A, I left the skins on the onions, which will give it some color, and then B, I let it sit overnight, so it really absorbed the sort of colors and flavors of the vegetables and the chicken. So now that we've got most of the broth, try to get the vegetables in there best we can. So this is a very helpful tool that pushes the flavor out of the vegetables. This is called a chinois. I actually think these are great for home kitchens. They're usually found in professional kitchens, but they're incredibly useful at home if you're country cooking. So here we have, look at the color of that. I could bathe in chicken stock. I love the way it smells. So I'm gonna push the juice out of the vegetables until it's like I mean, it doesn't have to be a pulp, but you want to get a lot of that good flavor out. And you've got a really fine mesh sieve here, so your stock is going to stay nice and clear despite the fact that we're really, you know, mashing everything. Okay, that's good enough. So let's see if I can carry this. Put this in the sink. And now we have this beautiful chicken stock. I'm going to set right there, and we'll just sink a ladle into it like this, and we can use it as needed. Okay? All right, so the next thing that we're going to do is sear our chicken. So I'm going to use this gorgeous cast iron pan to do that. Today we'll do a little olive oil, a little bit of butter. The next thing we're going to do is season the chicken, and I always see people seasoning the chicken too close. What you want to do is sort of rain the salt down, kosher salt, from about 6 inches up, and make sure it's evenly distributed, okay? We might as well season the breast too, because we're going to cook those in just a moment. All right, and then you can put the pepper on at this stage if you want. All right, and now you can see our butter is popping. We're gonna sear the thighs. You never wanna crowd the pan, because if you do, you're not gonna get it nice and brown. And turn that heat all the way up, okay? You really wanna get a nice, crispy skin on this chicken. All right, so not crowding the pan, and now you can take your salt and season the other side. Again, 6 inches up. Like that. All right, so we'll just let that cook. And now what we can do is start preparing our other ingredients. So here we have our cremini mushrooms. I usually remove the stems of the mushrooms because they are dried out typically. Then you're going to take a paper towel that's damp and just sort of run it along the mushroom, getting rid of any excess dirt. These are huge, so what I'm going to do is cut them in half and then come across like this. All right, so there we got that. Take a quick look here. Not yet. I want to show you guys what properly browned means, all right? People always have a tendency to yank the chicken off of the pan before it's ready, and when you do that, you're denying the skin the ability to crisp up. It will release itself from the pan. You just have to have faith, because otherwise you're going to tear the skin. Think about like putting a burger on the grill and trying to wrestle the burger off before it's ready and tearing it up. It's the same principle. The meat wants to sort of seal in the juices and wait longer than you think you need to in order for that to happen, and it will release itself and it will be nice and crisp. Cast iron is awesome because it rarely, nothing really sticks to it if it's well seasoned. And different spots on the pan are, hotter and less hot, so you really have to sort of be checking in on things pretty regularly. Now I see you got that nice crispness to the chicken. Good. But look, this one is not ready. We're gonna give it the time it needs. All right, so the next thing we're gonna get ready are our shallots. So I'm gonna cut them in half just so they're easier to slice into. I'm not rolling around on the board. So we're gonna take the chicken out of the pan, and what's left behind here is something called a fond, F-O-N-D, French word. And it's all the little bits and pieces that this chicken skin leaves in the pan, and it's where the flavor resides. So you want to use the liquid from the shallots to sort of liberate that fond, which will add so much flavor to the braise. And every single time you add a vegetable to a pan, you add a little bit of salt. And the reason is the salt brings the liquid out of the vegetable, so it cooks evenly through and sort of steams in its own juice rather than just sort of burning on the outside and being raw in the middle. So I always give the alliums, which in this case are shallots, or they could be onions or leeks. I always give them a little bit of a head start before I introduce the next ingredient. So once these start to soften up a little bit, we're going to add the mushrooms, okay? And let's just talk about cooking mushrooms for a second. There's two ways to cook mushrooms. One is sort of low and slow, and the other one is super hot. And if you're going to cook them low and slow, they're going to slowly cook down and release all of their juice, and then that juice is going to evaporate, and the flavor is going to condense into whatever dish you're making. That's how we're going to do it right now. The other way to do them is to fry them in really hot oil or butter, but not to crowd the pan so that they stay the same size and get nice and golden on the outside. That would be usually for like a garnish for a dish or something, but we're not doing that here. We're just going to put them in here and let the liquid sort of come out of them, and then let that liquid reduce and become part of the base of the sauce. So again, mushrooms in the pan, a little bit of salt. You salt throughout the cooking process. So the next thing that we're going to do is deglaze this pan. You can deglaze with any liquid: water, stock, alcohol. So I'm going to use sherry. I'm going to turn the flame off because it could ignite. You don't want that to happen in this instance anyway. So we'll pour a little sherry in there, and that's going to release all of those delicious bits from the bottom. And when the dish is finished and you taste it, it should be just about where it needs to be season-wise. Because if you try to taste something for the first time when it's all done, you're basically going from 0 to 60 with no point of reference. So this way, you should be almost where you need to be at the very end of the cooking process, and the dish should only need a touch more salt. So now is when you would bring in your thyme or a little rosemary if you wanted to. We have some parsley here, so I think we'll just put some of that in for nice flavor. So at this point, if you want to, you can thicken this a little bit. And the way that you do that is just with a little bit of flour. And you just literally sprinkle it over top. You can't put flour in if there's liquid in the pan because it'll clump up. We don't want that. So this is going to be our just a little bit of thickener for this dish, and we'll let that flour toast a little bit in the pan. All right, so here we got our stock, and I'm going to slowly, you're going to hear it sizzle. Slowly add the stock. Alright, and now I'm going to use the tongs to just sort of move everything around in it and distribute all the flavors. Here we have our chicken thighs. I'm going to rest those into the braise. Okay, and never leave the juice behind, even if it's a little bit. Okay, so we'll put that in there. And I would say, because this is going to go into the oven and it's going to reduce further, we could use just a little bit more stock, okay? So maybe a half a ladle full of stock. You always want the crispy bits of the chicken to be above the liquid. So that's that, and the last thing that I'm going to do, because I like acid in my food, is throw in a couple slices of lemon, and you really just can toss them in. You don't have to squeeze them. So we'll do one for each piece of chicken, okay? So this is good. It's going to go in the oven. It's going to cook for, if you put it at 325, it's going to cook for about 45 minutes. Until the sauce is nice and reduced. And if the sauce starts to dry up a little bit, you just add more liquid. That's it. All right? So this dish is done. Our braised chicken. We've got our thighs and our legs. I'm going to set this down because it's heavy as hell. And you've got a really nice braise that consists of mushrooms, a little bit of lemon, a little bit of mustard, some sherry, nice crispy skin on the chicken. And I would serve this with some baked potatoes that are nice and crisp. Maybe throw some fresh herbs on it, but that's a dinner for two easily, okay? So the next thing we're going to do is sear the chicken breasts. We're also going to sear the legs and bake them off so we can pull some of the meat from them and put it into our coconut ginger rice. So I'm going to turn this on. Again, we're using a big old cast iron pan. Let it get nice and hot. We're going to put some olive oil in it. Let that oil warm up with it. Put skin side down always, okay? You want to hear that nice sizzle. And we're going to do a small dice here, and the reason is you want everything to be sort of the size of a grain of rice, so quite tiny. We'll do the same with the carrots. So just cut off anything that doesn't look lovely. 12 o'clock root, come through like this. Just make tighter cuts than you did when you were doing a medium dice. Necessarily a need to do that. Alright, so we've got our onion, small dice. Next we're going to work on our carrots. Now the breasts here are actually not for this dish. They're for, you see how it's sticking? That means it's not ready yet. Okay, so we're going to give it another minute. The breasts are for the chicken Caesar salad that we're making, and just these little wings are for the coconut rice. Alright, so let's check this again and see if we've got that nice golden brown that we're looking for. Yeah, see that? I would argue you could even take that a little bit further. Let's look at this one. Not quite. Let's look at this guy. Nice. A little bit further. So what I'm doing here is just cutting the carrots into long, thin pieces to make them smaller when they go into the dish. So then we can just sort of come across them quickly. I'm going to use coconut oil as the fat for this dish because it's sort of consistent with the theme of the dish and what's going into it. So we've got maybe a tablespoon and a half of coconut oil. And then we're going to add our onions and our carrots. Put it on low heat, maybe medium-low heat. There's no real trick to getting garlic out of the skin other than giving it a nice, good smash like that, and then it should come more or less right out. I think a lot of people don't smash it hard enough. You really, I mean, you're just cutting it up into little pieces here, and the more you smash it, the more you sort of release all of the flavor and oils and such. So we'll come across. And the spoon helps you sort of get between the nooks and the crannies of the ginger, making it a lot easier. A vegetable peeler is too flat. Next thing we're going to do is cut the ginger. Alright folks, so once your onions are starting to look translucent, which means there's no longer any white in them, you can see they're starting to all look clear. And your carrots have softened, and your garlic and your ginger have softened a little bit. Then you can start adding your chicken stock. Now if you wanted to add spices to this, like turmeric or cumin, coriander, you would add them when the pan is relatively dry, and you would toast the seasonings, almost as if you were making a dal or some sort of curry. We're not going to do that today. We're going to stick with a really simple, basic coconut and ginger rice, but now would be the time to add spices. So now that our vegetables have softened, we're going to add some chicken stock. I'm going to add some more stock. And then we're just going to put in a cup and a half of rice. All right, so the only thing that this is still missing is we're gonna pull a little bit of chicken and add that. We've got some scallions that we'll put in. These are the greens, because we've already used the whites for something else. A little bit of cilantro, and then we'll throw in some peas and spinach, which will give this dish this beautiful spring color to it. It's really the simplest thing in the world, and it is really comforting. It's a really comforting dish. Kids love this. So yeah, that's dish number 2. Okay, so now we're gonna work on dish number 3, which is a chicken Caesar salad, basically. All right. Here we have a head of garlic. I'm gonna rip into that, and you know, I love garlic, so I use a lot of it in pretty much every recipe. But you don't have to use as much. Let's see, as much as I use. So again, nice smash. We'll start with 2 cloves, and this is for the dressing. So take the cloves out of the skin, take the roots off, and the next thing we're going to do is put them into a mortar and pestle. This is my favorite mortar and pestle. It's made by Milton Brook, which is a company based out of England. It doesn't break, and it has a really nice smooth surface, so it's easy to clean, and it's just super functional. And they come in all different sizes. Don't get one that's too small. You're not going to use it for anything. So here we have 2 cloves of raw garlic, a really nice big pinch of kosher salt, and we're going to pound the garlic. You might want to come get this from the top down because it's an important step. So a lot of people, they go like this immediately, but that's not the move. The move is to use the salt and just go up and down until the garlic is literally pulverized. And the beauty of this is that once you have a true garlic paste, then you can coat the inside of the bowl or the mortar, and it really penetrates the flavor of the dressing. And if it's not getting pulverized, you need more salt, okay? And then sort of brush it all to the base of the bowl. All right, now we have a paste. And so now we can sort of mash it around like that. Okay, next thing that we're gonna do is add some mayo and mustard. Now I'm sort of cheating here. You could start with a couple of egg yolks and add oil and make an emulsification, which we'll save for another day. This is sort of a quick, fast version of making a Caesar. This is something that's already emulsified, already has eggs in it. So we'll put a little mayo, little mustard, all right, and then get the garlic flavor in there. Now, anchovies optional. I would say they're not really if you're making a Caesar, but my mother wouldn't eat it if there were anchovies in it. So we'll just tell her there aren't. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, let's do 4 anchovies, okay? And you do want to chop them up a little bit because of the bones. Tiny little bones, but the knife will just saw right through them, and then texture of them won't be an issue. So 4 anchovies, chopped nice and tiny, like this. We'll put those right into the dressing. And again, just mash them the best you can, your mortar and pestle. All right, great. So next thing we're gonna do is put some lemon juice in here. A Caesar salad loves lemon juice. So I would say the juice of half of a big fat juicy lemon, and if you don't have a big fat juicy lemon, then a whole sad lemon. No seeds, obviously. All right, so we've got our lemon juice in there. 1 little seed fell in. Okay, and the compost, so we'll mix that in. And so now you've got the base of a Caesar dressing. The thing we're missing still is cheese, oil, and pepper. So I'm gonna crack some pepper into this, quite a bit. And then we're gonna grate some cheese and get some oil. And the cheese is actually the last thing you're gonna do. So let's just, Now you already have an emulsification with the Hellmann's, so you shouldn't have to worry about it breaking at this point, okay? A little bit more. Should look like a creamy salad dressing. All right? And remember, the cheese is going to sort of thicken it up, so you want it a little looser than you think it should look. Okay, so next thing we're going to do is grate the cheese into here. Try to make some room. Like a half a cup maybe, whole cup if you love cheese. You could also do it directly into the salad. All right. See, that thickens it up quite a bit. And there you have a really quick and really easy Caesar salad. So the next thing we're going to do, or Caesar dressing. Next thing we're going to do is clean all of the greens, slice up a couple of tomatoes. I'm going to make some croutons. All right, so we've got those. We're going to put them right into the butter. You really just want one, yeah, we can get these in there. You just want one layer, otherwise they don't turn nice and brown. So we're going to salt and pepper them, and the butter is what helps them turn nice and golden brown. Okay, so we'll let those sit there until they start to gain some color, and then we will turn them all with a set of tongs. When you're searing meat and moving it into the oven to finish it off, it's a pretty quick process. You want to have the temperature really hot. So we've got it at 400, 425, and that'll cook your chicken breast through in always under 10 minutes, usually closer to 6 or 7. It depends how thick they are. They feel firm to the touch, which means they're done. When you're letting something rest, you always want to do it on the cutting board, and you want to let those juices redistribute. Otherwise, the meat sort of collapses when you cut into it. So we'll let that cool. In the meantime, we're going to cut up our tomato, our avocado, put some croutons on our salad, and then all it still needs is the chicken. All right? Congee is effectively rice that's been overcooked in liquid, almost always in coconut milk and usually with some ginger. So that's what we've got here. And what I'm going to do to serve this is first we're going to add just a handful of fresh spinach and let it cook down in the congee. All right, some peas. Maybe just a sprinkling of these scallions to get a little bit of raw onion flavor. All right, we're going to throw in some scallions at the last minute, like that. And then stir all that into the congee. Look how gorgeous that is. Okay.